First of all, my apologies for the weird angle because I had to take my console apart because my switch isn't working here and the weather has not been conducive to me or favorable in my favor for me to go up to the junkyard and pull the part, because I can get the part there for like $15. Otherwise I'd have to spend probably well over $100 for that little assembly piece. So I don't want to have to take it apart again. So it's kind of sitting in there loosely. I don't have it screwed in, so it's making things a little wonky. But I still have to have other things attached to it. So anyway, I have a friend who's been fighting a seatbelt ticket, which they have no authority to tell you whether or not to wear a seatbelt. That is what is called specific performance in equity, and that requires a contract. So you go into court, right? And he's been fighting this in Johnson City Court for the past several months. And if you follow me on Facebook, I have two profiles, one public, one private. The private one is under my maiden name, and the public one is under my married name, Shauna Cole. I do have a video up explaining what happened in the courtroom the last few times we went there. The last time we went, they claimed that they did not receive his paperwork, and they tried to make him sign a waiver. So the assistant DA said, well, in order for you to prove that you were here, you need to sign this. And it said right on the top of it, waiver. So they want you to sign a waiver, and they're making it sound like that you need to sign this in order to prove that you answered. Now, there are some legal terms here that I would like to inform you of that you probably assume the meaning of, that are just not true. One of them is appear. To appear to the court means that you submit to its jurisdiction. And when you make a general appearance to the court, if you don't specify the reason why you are submitting to the court, then you waive any deficiencies and you waive knowledge of jurisdiction for the process of the court, which we'll get into here eventually, because I would like to show you where to find that. I can make the citations right now because I've cited these authorities many times, and it angers me so much at how in your face the corruption is. So to appear in front of the court, right? You don't have to appear to the court. You do not have to submit to its jurisdiction. What you are responsible for is you need to answer any complaint, which my friend did in writing. Not only that, he made what is called a special appearance. In this case, it was a corporeal appearance, meaning he brought his body to the court for the sole purpose of protesting the court for several reasons. One, deficiency of service. Now, when you are served with a complaint, there needs to be an affidavit of service on file. And the service of affidavit needs to be complete with what is called a jurat, G-U-R-A-T. A jurat is a record of duration. The duration is when, where, and before whom the oath was administered. In this case, it would be the oath of perjury, under the penalty of perjury. And that needs to be done by an officer. It's nice to figuratively see you too, but thank you, Tommy Stock 64. Gosh, I hope that's a firearm reference, Stock, because that would be awesome. Okay, I digress. So anyway, when that is done, right, and that is considered verified information, right, because they're swearing under the penalty of perjury, and they've been able to get away with not doing this because of this myth of, First Amendment freedom of speech. So the way that this is interpreted is you can say whatever you want and you're not going to get in trouble. So basically you can lie and you're protected. That's not true, because there's slander, which is stuff that you say about somebody that could damage their reputation and cause them to lose their court. And when somebody loses their court, they lose their freedom and they lose their liberty. Okay. And that's what the government is supposed to protect, right? And that's the purpose of the court, is to enforce these individual rights. My nose is running. Where's my tissues? It's still a little chilly here in the twilight zone of Binghamton, New York. Just a second here. Okay, but now you see this hyperbole that you're protected from this, and that kind of speech is protected. No, freedom does not mean that you escape all accountability and liability for how you choose to exercise your freedom. So if I go around and I start accusing people of being pedophiles, and it causes that person to lose jobs, to be arrested, to do this, I am now guilty of slander. Libel is when it is done in writing. So, and we see this, like the Southern Poverty is freaking really good at libel, right? I've even had the district attorney cite the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it's the equivalent of the schoolyard bully calling you names when you dare to use reason and logic against them, right? And in this case, it was the term sovereign citizen, which is fallacious. It's an oxymoron, because if you're sovereign, you're the supreme authority. And if you're a citizen under the 13th Amendment, you're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, meaning you're a subordinate. So can you be the supreme authority and the subordinate? It doesn't work. Okay, and then you have it coming based on the definition of the Southern Poverty Law Center that anybody who claims this common law is a possible tax cheat. This is coming from a 501c3, which is a not-for-profit corporation. Not-for-profit corporations doesn't mean that they don't turn a profit. It only means that they don't pay shareholders. I used to go to my corporate brainwashings when I worked for United Health Services here in Broome County, and that contradistinction was made. And then I had to go to the corporate compliance brainwashings, and I did all that, so I know what these creatures are. They're just another creature at law, right? The NFL is a 501c3, for Christ's sake. Okay, again, perspective, right? So anyway, getting back to the process server, they want you to waive those deficiencies, right? By having you sign a waiver. Then there's the jurisdiction for the process of the court. Now, when you say jurisdiction, they're going to tell you subject matter jurisdiction. That's not what you're arguing, subject matter jurisdiction. Then they're going to claim it's geographical jurisdiction. No, it's not the geographical jurisdiction. What he was protesting was the jurisdiction for the process of the court. In this case, it was specific performance and equity, right? Which would be a contract thing, because otherwise they can't make you. Hi. My friend's picking on me here. I'll be in a second. 1 second. Okay, I got to get going here. So I'm waiting for my other friend. The one who's having all the issues here with the seatbelt thing, because he's been in several car accidents, and there's been times when he hasn't worn a seatbelt where he's been ejected from the vehicle, thus saving his life. That happened to my cousin about 20 years ago. Her and her friend were hit by another vehicle, and she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She was ejected from the car and had half of, like, her face was ripped off. And then her friend almost died. And the running joke is, and she's like, well, maybe I should have worn my seatbelt, then I'd be getting a $3 million payout too for the injuries that were sustained, but she also could have died. So had she not, but this is a personal choice that belongs to the individual, because the state cannot pursue your happiness for you. See the First Amendment. So with this, anyway, it's just become ridiculous. So this is what's called specific performance and equity, but they'll claim it's a quasi-criminal case, right? Quasi. So it's not. Oh, but it is. Why? Because they said so. However, again, getting back to the jurisdiction for the process of the court, you need to know what it is. And what they've been doing is they've been trying to get people to waive their rights, waive the jury trial, which is guaranteed to them through government's institution, right? That they already pay for and that they want you to pay for again and again and again and again. So, oh, I know who that is. Somebody else showed up. Looks like we're going to have a little soiree here. And when they do this, God, I'm getting so distracted because I didn't expect anybody to be here yet. And I thought I had time to kind of update you without my kids in the car. And, they kind of get upset because they've witnessed some things themselves being in the public school system for as long as they were. So the process of the court, okay? So they're not disclosing the process of the court, which the magistrate of the court, AKA the judge, is supposed to do pursuant to Amendment 6, of the amendments attached to the Constitution. Don't ever refer to them as a Bill of Rights because your rights come from God. You do not have constitutional rights. You have unalienable rights that are inherent because you were endowed by God. The government is endowed by the people. So there's a hierarchy here. And yes, you are the sovereign. Citizens, how do you distinguish one citizen from another? Because by law, corporations are citizens. Okay, so who outranks who? Okay, and a good example of this this blurring has been with like Citizen United, right? Like corporations are people. Yeah, but what that ruling did is it said, okay, corporations are persons, which is true. They're persons at law. They are composite persons. What that ruling did, oh, he's here. What that ruling did is it gave rights to corporations that the people who are the sovereigns of this nation do not have. Do you see what they did there? They're reversing the order of things, and it's creating chaos. It is essentially chaos, which is a crux of anarchy, because anarchy, and I get very upset with my libertarian constituents who are like, yes, anarchy. I'm like, we're living in it. They're like, no, it's a world without law. Are they following the law? Because right now they're disarming people. They're abrogating people's rights to educate their children. They're forcing you into a sick care system. They're poisoning our food by law, which not everything that comes out of the legislation is law. And this contradistinction has been made time and time again between legislative fiat and law, okay? Law is supposed to be in pursuance of executing enumerated powers. Enumerated powers are listed, and you'll see them claim, oh, well, the general welfare clause. No, the preamble does not vest any authority. That is the intent of the law, which is to establish this institution for its beneficent means. And it's saying this is what we believe is in the best interest of the general welfare of the public. And then they are enumerated by article, and then by section, and then by clause. So anybody claiming, and I can show you case law again, all the way back, saying this is the preamble is advisive. It confers no power whatsoever. It establishes who is the trustor and who is the trustee. We, the people, we're the trustor, and our officers who administer government are the trustee. So, and then, of course, the amendments, again, you look at the preamble to the amendments, and it will tell you what exactly is the what exactly the prohibitions are. And it'll say right in there, to prevent abuse and misconstruction of the law, which they've done time and time again, right? Can we agree on that? So getting back to this anarchy, I'm not an anarchist. I'm all about a Republican form of government, and I can get into that. I can get into the authorities for that, but I'm not going to now because everybody that showed up is supposed to show up now. We're going to go in and have our little soiree with my mechanic friends. But one of the things that they do is they want you to waive the jurisdiction. They want you to continue to operate in a foreign jurisdiction that operates according to bar policy. And you will see this in all the new editions of Black's Law Dictionary, where they've taken the law out of books and out of those definitions and replaced it with the UCC, which is the commercial code, and bar policy. I have a law dictionary that has very little to no bar policy in it. And when I get my computer issues worked out, because I'm not very good with Linux, that requires somebody who can go in and program. And believe it or not, my brain is at full capacity right now. I don't want to learn anything new. I don't want to learn any more coding. At one point, I was teaching myself HTML and JavaScript, and I don't want to do it. As cool as I think technology is as a science and logically driven person, its applications in modern day society, particularly when it comes to security, which is has all the hallmarks of a police state. I want to stay away from it. Okay, so the process of the court for jurisdiction, or the jurisdiction of the court for process, that has to do with due process, right? And I've been confronted with myself when I've gone into court for myself that there's no common law. New York State doesn't recognize common law. And I'm kind of saying, going, geez, well, the Constitution says this. And in fact, due process is defined as according to the course of common law. And if you go to the New York State Constitution under Article 6, which is the judiciary title, and you go to Section 1, Part B, process of the court, it says, whatever court the legislature may establish. So that gives the legislature the authority to erect courts for geographical location and subject matter jurisdiction. And then it goes on to name the different types of courts: criminal courts, civil courts, family courts, blah blah blah, shall be courts of record. Now, shall be, if you know your grammar, you have a verb phrase there. Shall is a modifier. In law, it has what's called a mandatory operative effect. They have no discretion to do anything other than to provide a court of record. And a court of record has 4 elements, may have a 5th. One of the most important things, okay, is the process of the court, which is common law. Now, getting back to the Southern Poverty Law Center and their little definition of sovereign citizen, they'll sit there and tell you, oh, they claim this common law. Well, yeah, it's in our Constitution. It's listed in the Article 1, and then it's also the process of the court. So I've gone down to the law library and have gotten if you go through the AM jurisprudence, I like 16, 16A, 16B, and then there's the New York State jurisprudence, and you start looking up the different articles and how they've been interpreted. They're taken literally according to common language and not according to legal language, which legal language used to be common language, and it's not anymore because public education. They've completely been able to abrogate common law just on that alone. Because now they interpret a court of record being, oh, well, you just keep a record. No. A court of record is a court of the people, which is the law of the people, which is common law. And it has to do with how you bring somebody under jurisdiction and how you protect that person's rights in case they are falsely accused. but you operate on bar policy now. When I went through my criminal stuff for the court, and I confronted my criminal lawyer and said, I know what's going on here. This is just pure and outright fraud. And he's like, oh, well, there we don't do common law, meaning we, the bar association. And I said, well, no. And he's like, oh, but there are benefits to our way of doing things. And what do you suppose one of those benefits are? It's being able to accuse somebody, fuck up their life, and you can use the legal system to harass that person without fear of being held accountable for lying. I mean, look at how social work is done, right? Somebody can just call in an anonymous tip, which violates your right to be confronted with the witnesses against you. They can just run with that gossip, show up at your house. The judge will issue a warrant because, oh God, we got to protect the person who's turning you in. They could be lying. And then all that power is shifted to the social worker or the CPS worker who just shows up at your house, might not like the fact that you're answering them, and all of a sudden you're found as indicated in their database. Hey, I am. And you know what their investigation consisted of? My ex-in-laws. My ex-in-laws who have a very different take on politics and world affairs than I do, who think that communism is great and who think Republicans are the bad person, unless, they're giving money to the NFL because, hey, when your ex-father-in-law is, one of Jerry Sandusky's, yay, come on, and a lot of people who've gone through this know, but they don't know how it's happening. They know it's corrupt. They know inherently, and they just know instinctively that it is wrong. And this is why. And they put you under duress. So what they've done to my friend now, my friend has answered, and he's made an answer on paper. He's made 3 corporeal appearances. They've tried to get him to sign his rights away through a waiver, and he refused to. I was with him. He was like, no. And they're like, well, just sign your name here so we know. And I'm like, that's fucking screwy. Right? And he's looking at it like, no. And I'm just like kind of sitting there reading it, right? Because as soon as he saw waiver, he was like, no, and I'm reading it, as he's having his back and forth with the ADA, and I'm reading it. And then she's just trying to baffle him with bullshit. So then I stepped in and was like, hey, he did X, Y, and Z. Now the burden lays on you to answer them. So now they're threatening to suspend his license for not appearing to the court. And now they're trying to hit him with what's called a scaffolding law, which I don't know what that is, but it's more bullshit, more legislative edict being enforced as law. I'm telling you, and you know what the super screwy thing is here in Broome County is that the Binghamton, the chief of police, his son died from a drug overdose. The current district attorney, Stephen Cornholio, Cornwell, his son got arrested for being in prison. I have not, the British Accreditation Registry, I've not been able to verify that. What I do know is if you, here in New York State, if you go to the Secretary of State for New York State, the what is it called? You go to the corporate filings and you can search their database. If you search for the New York State Bar Association or the Broome County Bar Association, and you have to use the exact whatever it is. I think it might be the Bar Association of Broome County. It's a not-for-profit. They will not tell me exactly what species of not-for-profit it is, whether or not it's a 501c3 or some other creature of law chartered under that authority, but it's a private entity. And then they'll also claim that you need a license to practice law. That's not true either, because I've gone in with my friend and he's like, I'm afraid to speak, because I'm going to tell them to go screw themselves. And I'm like, well, you could, I'll, you tell me what you want, and then I'll, communicate that information. And they're like, oh no, you can't do that without a license. And I'm like, okay, where's that law? And then they just throw us out of court. I'm like, you're claiming an authority to discriminate against me because of this licensing business, but yet you can't cite the law for me because I've been through those law books. I don't see any law. The only law there is that if I'm using the courtroom as my place of business, I have to be registered with New York State. There is a registry, but whenever you go into the court, and this is true for Broome County, once you get rejected by, if you apply to like the public defender or legal aid for counsel, for free counsel, which, by the way, you should look into Hillary Clinton and legal aid. Then, I gotta flip on my battery here. Okay, so once you, my hair. So once you apply there, if you have any assets whatsoever, they're going to turn you down. So let's say, for example, you own your own home, which is usually the case why people get turned down. What that judge does is he refers you to the Bar Association and not the state registry, okay? Another thing that they'll do is you'll get Bar Association mailings. You'll get those in the mail using county envelopes paid for by the taxpayer. So now you have this private institution that is now using taxpayer money to propagate this myth that, that only licensed people can practice law or can defend themselves or whatever. And as of recently, I went to the Bar Association website to make copies of their membership form and their mission statement and all that. And you know where it directed me to? You want to guess? The Unified Court System and the Broome County courts. They're starting to converge. And that was the crux. That was the crux of the convention, the constitutional convention that the Bar Association was pushing for here in New York State. And I was for a lot of the things in that as far as the unions go, but I voted no against it because what they wanted to do is they wanted to actually prosecute criminal cases in family court, which is probably the biggest kangaroo court there is. All the power is vested into the judge, which is another thing that abrogates a court of record, because the magistrate and the judicial tribunal are two separate things. The judicial tribunal is a jury. Then what they want to do is they don't want judges to be voted in. They want a special selected panel of judges, bar selected, to just be appointed into these judge positions. So the people of New York State couldn't even vote for judge. They would be selected by the Bar Association or a committee made up of Bar Association members. And then there were some other things, and it was the Bar Association that pushed for this unified court system that blends equity in criminal cases, so that way you don't know which is which. Judges hate equity. They do. They hate equity. So as soon as you bring it up, they're going to shut that shit down, because if it's a criminal case, it's just a matter of, well, did you follow the law or didn't you? And since every single edict coming from the legislature is now considered law, you're screwed. You have no rights. You have none whatsoever, according to them, although God says something different. But, however you experience God, it's not for me to say. I know there's going to be some atheists in there, and I'm like, that's fine. If your God is your intellect, then by all means, if it's Bozo the Clown, hey, you know what? You do you, but in the end, I know that at one point or another, we all got to face judgment from God, no matter how you choose to personify that or experience it or not. So, and that's the crux of the Constitution anyway. So the process of the court, the next time I do this, I just want to show you so that way I can show you the citations and show you, because I've gone down to that law library. I've looked this stuff up. I've opened books that have never been opened to find out this stuff. And now that I have shared this with you, and I'll post it on my YouTube, I'm sure now I'm going to be trolled, and the next time I go into the law library, those books will miraculously disappear, just like a lot of stuff seems to out of the court record and other things. But yeah, that's how they do it. That's how they do it. You don't have to sign anything. You don't have to even say anything. They intimidate people. They put people under duress. It's just outright fraud. It's outright fraud is what it is. And then, come election time, once the primaries are over, you'll start seeing the yard signs for the judges, right? Highest bar rated judge. Yeah, that means you're getting screwed. You think about that. Because everybody thinks that, oh, well, you're a fool if you represent yourself. And I'm sitting here thinking you're a fool if you don't. One of our councilmen, Dan Livingston, who is a progressive, and he's, part of the Green movement and probably part of the AOC crowd there. I knew Dan. He was one of my petitioners when I was working with the Green Party, and I left the Green Party which I think now should be obvious reasons to you. I was there when the Green New Deal was, when that was constructed. So I know what the thinking is behind it, and I disagreed with a lot of it because I'm not a climate retard, I'm more concerned with the fact that we're being poisoned and we're being exterminated by law. So I don't think that preventing people from breathing out CO2 or lowering the CO2 is going to help humanity at all. And I don't feel that humans are a threat to the planet. I mean, you want to go ask the people of Pompeii or Sri Lanka if they feel they're a threat to the planet? I don't think so. We're a danger to ourselves, and that's as individuals. So anyway, Dan Livingston, he knows me because he was one of my petitioners when I helped the Green Party get ballot access in 2010 here in New York State, and then help them get I use the 4th Deluxe. Some people like to use the 5th. However, the 5th is when they really started going heavy with the what do you call it? The Bar Association policy. So, and you'll see that if you go in now, I think they're on the 10th edition of Black's Law Dictionary. I'll give you a little task here if you want to inform yourself. You go look for the law of the flag in the current edition of Black's Law Dictionary. You're not going to find it in there. And this is a very important law. The law of the flag it's an admiralty law that has implications on land. And basically what it is it says that the flag is a legal notice of the laws governing the contract, and particularly when you're on the seas in international waters, when you board a ship, the flag is a legal notice of the laws that govern any contract that you make with the captain of the ship. So, and this is the other thing, and that would be the case of Roostrap versus the people of Illinois, and that would be RHUSTRAT versus the people of Illinois. And it was a trademark case. In that trademark case, and it's completely missing now from the 10th edition of Black's Law Library. So anyway, so in that trademark case, it was a cigar manufacturer who had used the American flag in his little trademark for his company. While the legislature in Illinois had made a law saying nobody can use the flag in print except for artists, right? because we need to protect their right to freedom of speech. So there was this whole discussion, and judicial cognizance was made as to why this law was important, and thus solidifying the legislature's right to make a law prohibiting the use of the flag in print, because the law of the flag, because it is a jurisdictional notice of the laws that govern the contract, okay? So the law was ruled, though, the law itself was ruled discriminatory because you're now giving artists an unfair trade advantage, and you're protecting their freedom of speech but nobody else's, and the law was disregarded and avoided out and found to be unconstitutional, because everybody has the right to freedom of speech, not just artists. So yeah, so then that whole decision was reversed. I believe it was in one of the appellate courts, or was it one of the district courts in Illinois? I forget which court, but nonetheless, what's important here is judicial cognizance. So when you step into that courtroom and that flag, right? And I'm not trying to be a flag it, because I see a lot of this nonsense floating around where you just need to remove the flag from the courtroom. No, that's not how it works, people. That flag is a legal notice of who you are contracting with. If you go to Title 4 of the USCA, which is the USC, United States Code, sometimes it's annotated, Chapter 1, that's the flag. That describes the flag of the Republic, okay? There's no gold fringe described down there. That's sections 1 and 2, and it's in great detail, okay, with diagrams. And then section 3, I believe, is the mutilation of the flag. That flag with a gold fringe, that's not for you, okay? That's not for you. Admiralty, commercial flags have a gold fringe, and Marshal, Army, military flags have the gold fringe. Both my grandfather served in the Navy, so I was already aware of this, but I didn't know where to find the law. And then if you search the Army regulations, there's rules governing the pole, the mast, when it's to be full mast, when it's to be half mast. It just goes into great detail. So if you go in there to that courtroom demanding to remove the flag, that does not change the fact that you've been given legal notice, okay? Removing the flag does not change that. It's like if I put up a no trespassing sign and you see that sign and you come on my property, ripping down the sign does not change the fact that you've been given legal notice. So when I see this nonsense floating around about the flag, I have to laugh and go, no, that's not how it works. But there's also a context too, right? So if I see a sign that says fine for parking and there's no citation of authority, how am I supposed to interpret that without a citation of authority? Yeah, officer, yeah, judge, it said fine for parking. I mean, come on, there's also a context too. So, and be careful of the hyperbole that's floating around. I understand why people are upset. I know people are desperate for change, and they're desperate. Yeah. And I know people are desperate for change, but I wouldn't look to a lawyer to secure those rights, because they profit off of what's called barratry, and barratry is inciting litigation at law, and they profit off of that. So the more laws that the legislature is going to pass, and the more they're enforced by incompetent police officers, the more money it's going to make them. So getting back to Dan Livingston, before I digress, because I didn't have a script for this, I just came on to rant because I'm very aggravated at this point. I'm not a violent person. I use my words. So I was saying to Dan, because he's upset about the corruption, and I disagree with him on a lot of fronts, being the card carrying capitalist that I am, and him being a socialist. I said, well, I said, you do realize that most of the slumlords in Binghamton are judges and lawyers. And he's like, yeah. He's like, and they hide behind LLCs, because you'll go and you'll look into one LLC and then you'll see that it's held by another LLC, and it's almost like to the effect legally of unmasking a Scooby-Doo villain, right? Where there's just these layers and layers and layers. And you'll see this with these super PACs, and it's just beyond corrupt, because hey, it's law. When we can make corruption legal through legislative edict, right? So yeah, I try, but I'm not a lawyer, I just go and I read, and if you know how to use a dictionary, and you can, you have basic elementary grammar schools, which most people do not have now, you'll figure out soon that you're being defrauded, that this is just massive fraud upon fraud upon fraud in the courts. So, the next time I do this, I hope to be able to show you some visuals. I've got to go now. I've been 41 minutes now. My friends are waiting for me. So, and I have to go to the store, and I'm having issues with my computer. I went to print out my kids' schoolwork, and it did not want to communicate to the computer. So I'm like, and of course my kids are okay, because they're like, oh, we'll just do it later, and I like to get the lessons out of the way for the day. So, anyway, yeah, so feel free to, to do that. I think, Bill Collins has, and I think I have the link on my YouTube page for the Supreme Law. He has a PDF copy, I believe, of Black's Law 5th or 3rd on his website. You can refer to that. I personally, what I did is I went to eBay and I just stalked the listings for a good 4 months, and I even looked for misspelled terms in regards to the Black's Law Dictionary, and I was able to get my Black's Law Dictionary for $66, and because it was spelled wrong in the listing. So yeah, well, thank you. So I hope you're all doing well, and I have more, particularly about driver's licenses. But I will say this, a term you need to know and familiarize yourself with is called PRIMA, P-R-I-M-A, facie evidence, and facie, F-A-C-I-E, I believe. It's evidence that doesn't need to be put into evidence. It's taken at face value. When you surrender your driver's license to a police officer, that is used as prima facie evidence against you. But there's no law requiring you, if you're a traveler in an automobile with your automobile guests, requiring you to have a driver's license for using the road. And I can get into that, but that's how I was able to catch one judge in Port Crane. I got him to admit on paper that he was basically committing fraud. So when I went in a second time, and I went in with a friend of mine, and I confronted him on it, he couldn't get me out of that courtroom fast enough, and it got dismissed. Okay, I gotta go.